This is James Simpson and Mike Simpson. This is our father and son podcast on lighting. So we are talking about lighting careers, and this is episode 2, and we're talking to Mike about his highlights of his career in this episode. We know that there's quite a lot of highlights, so we're just going to do 3 and then maybe do another one in the future. So we're going to start with one of my highlights. These are actually, I came up with the highlights thinking about what you would think of as highlights, but my highlight was always, as a child, Tower Bridge, because I can remember standing on London Bridge watching the fireworks, and how old was I? 7?
I think you were younger than that.
Really?
It was 1987.
I was 2 and a half. Yeah.
2, yeah.
But I can remember standing there, so that's the impact it had on me, was standing there watching the fireworks over the bridge, which Margaret Thatcher had set off.
Yeah.
Knowing that my dad was responsible for whatever it was they were celebrating. That was really important to me at the time. And I carry that with me in my early years, being proud of my dad, because there was this thing, and every time we saw Tower Bridge, what do we call it? Daddy's Tower Bridge.
Daddy's Tower Bridge, yeah.
And there's still a picture of it hanging up on your wall.
Do you remember that when we were commissioning it, I've been not away, but I've been late because we were commissioning during the evening, during the night, obviously. And the last night, I took you up because it had more or less all been done, and we got the photographers over. So they were taking pictures, and I can remember putting you on my shoulders and carrying you over the bridge. But before that, we'd gone to the electrician's hut. So this was London Electricity, who did all the installation work, just to meet everybody that was there, say, hello, we're here, sort of thing. And I won't say you destroyed the hut, but you did your normal thing of finding wires and pulling them all out. And when we left, there was quite a lot of wire over the electrician's hut.
I made my contribution to Tower Bridge.
Absolutely. And maybe you've also forgotten that we had a couple of people over from Holland who were taking pictures. Right. And having walked over the bridge, we went up to their room at the hotel, and you discovered the minibar.
Right.
And maybe you don't remember this, but you discovered that if you opened the minibar and took, you could take a drink out, and there was like orange juice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it charge you for every single drink?
Yeah, because every time you took something out, it charged their room.
Well, it was on Philips, right? Wow. So, I mean, we've cut out a bit in the episodes here about how you got into the job you were doing in Philips, and we'll come back to that. But I just wanted to get into the highlights.
Yeah.
So let's just set the scene, right? So you're working at the time in lighting design, was it called, or lighting application?
No, at that time, it was sort of a little bit of marketing, a little bit design.
Okay.
And it was on the outside of the exterior part of our business.
Yeah.
And I had a call one day from Mike Goodwin, who was our MD, to say, can you get up to London this afternoon? Because he'd just come back from Paris, so 1986, which was the 100th year of the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
And we just relit the Eiffel Tower.
Right. And was that something you were involved with?
No, that's our people in France were doing it. Okay. But they'd had a big switch on, national monument, etc.
Like, where's ours?
And, well, he was over there with Hugh Olson, who was chair of one of the committees in the Corporation of London. And they were flying back into London, having been to this opening ceremony. And that was exactly the conversation they had. Well, we've just lit the iconic landmark for France. What is the iconic landmark for UK? So it's Tower Bridge.
It is, yeah.
So he said, well, we need to light Tower Bridge.
Yeah.
So I got this call to go up and meet with the people of the City of London and pick it up as a potential project.
So it wasn't a tender at this point. It
wasn't a tender.
Mike, come and talk to us about how you light a bridge.
Yeah.
Had you lit bridges at this point?
I had lit a few.
Okay.
I think by then, I hadn't done Albert Bridge. I hadn't done Albert Bridge.
Albert Bridge was after. I can remember that.
Yeah. So this might have been the first.
Okay. Well, I mean, talk about,
nice one to start with.
Starting with a good one.
But I had previously the city lighting engineer was someone called Basil Austin. Again, one of these figures that from the past president of the Institution of Lighting Engineers, or the APLE as it was in those days. And at that earlier, part of my job was to do sort of fault finding, so things weren't working right on site. And I was up at Tower Bridge with Basil because some of the lamps were going green. They're turning a bit green, the old metal halide lamps, and we wanted to try and work out what the cause was. And I think in the end, the floodlights had been mounted not horizontally, but the lamps were at an angle.
Right.
And this was causing all the metals in the lamp to do things that was giving it a green hue. Anyway, at that time, the only part of Tower Bridge that was lit were the two river faces of the two towers. So the front and the back of the river faces, and that was all that was lit. So the concept was to say, well, there's much more than that of the bridge. It goes right from the riverbed, the river itself, up to the top of the towers, and it goes from the two banks. And actually, if you look at what's lit, it's just a very small part of it. So the concept was to show the whole bridge off in its full magnificence from bank to bank, which meant lighting it not just in 2D, these river faces, but to light it all the faces. To try to get some sort of modelling, the river faces were lit to twice the level to the side faces.
Oh, okay.
So that it didn't look like just one facade. It gave you some modelling on the towers.
A little bit of sort of false perspective, sort of trickery.
Yeah.
Oh, how interesting.
And we wanted to light the chains, which previously hadn't been lit, and we wanted to light right down the bascules to water level. Bearing in mind that the tide there must be, I don't know, 14, 20 feet or something.
Well, it goes up and down.
Up and down. I mean, you can see it if you can see the watermarks. So that was the beginning of the design process. And at that time, I worked with our design team in Holland on the design, and we were doing, we bought some equipment out on site, did some trials. Would never do something like that without doing some actual on-site trials. But of course, the fascinating thing is that when you work on a project like that, and I always say that about any project, you get to go to places that the public don't go to.
Yes.
So we went down into the bascule chambers where the weights swing backwards and forwards.
You've seen pictures of it when you go on the tour, but you don't get to go in there.
You don't get to...
Why would you possibly need to go in there as part of a lighting study? Or is it just like, I'm with the engineer, he's just showing us around?
Well, it's partly that. You always take that opportunity.
Yeah.
But we also had to work out how we were going to get the cables from one side to the other.
Right.
So, part of the whole design of the project that you work through with the people who are designing the electrical infrastructure is where you're going to get the cables. Where you're going to put the lights. Are you going to put the lights where it's absolutely impossible to get cables? So do you then have to compromise your design? And, it has to be practical in terms of being able to install. Some of the control gear was mounted in chambers under the, in the bridge deck itself.
Right. Because you need to get to it for access. If you
need to get to it for
but this is design. And sometimes people think that design is just creativity. Like the muse comes and sits on your shoulder and you have wonderful ideas like an artist. But design is going through all of the little challenges and constraints and finding the one that works best, that delivers the concept. So what was the sort of the equipment that you were using at that point?
Well, so at that time it was all metal halide.
Right.
So it was it varied, well, almost. It varied from 400 watt up to 2 kilowatt metal halide. Right. So we were using some of the big floodlights that we were putting in stadia at the time. And then right along the walkway, we used a continuous run of waterproof fluorescents in a rather nice fitting that we had in the range, which wasn't like a bare batten in a waterproof. It had a nice reflector around it. So you could actually angle these reflectors and really push light onto the walkway that ran along the top. And then right in the middle is the coat of arms of the City of London. And we lit that with what was then the latest light source, which we called White Son. So this was a high pressure sodium lamp that run at such a high pressure that you got good quality white light, so color rendering of 80. And it was also being used a lot at that time in retail applications. Really made the colors sing.
Well, why not use that for the whole bridge?
It was only available in 70, 100 watt maximum.
Okay, right.
Just didn't. It was perfect for lighting up the gilt.
Yes.
Of the crest with the red and the blue. But these had to be pushed out on brackets so it would shine up. And the architect that we were working with, who was like looking after the whole structure of the bridge, making sure we weren't going to destroy it, the consultant architect you have in any of these projects, said, it would be nice if these brackets were only visible or weren't visible during the day. So maybe we could have them on some sort of motorized hinge. So they came back during the day and then they came out at night.
That's bound to fail.
And we ended up, someone had a connection with this company called Rollercoaster. I don't know if they're still around, in Germany. And they made barriers, that go up in car parks. So we went off to the Rollercoaster factory in Germany with the idea of using some of their barrier technology to move these brackets.
So it actually happened? You actually built this thing?
No, because the cost of these brackets was almost the cost of the whole of the rest of the project.
Yeah, just so that the architect could say, yes, it looks. Yeah. I mean, it's still going to be there. It's just going to be flush against the wall.
The fact is that, the brackets did stick out.
Yes.
It was about 1.5 meters. But from the distance, you don't read them at all because you're seeing them against the rest of the bridge structure.
So you've been sitting in your lighting design office at Philips, and you get this call from Mike Goodwin.
Yes.
Saying, go and light this bridge. At what point did you realise what it was you were doing? Because sometimes I feel like you could be doing something really amazing and not realise until it's finished.
It was absolutely that. Right. Yeah, because Tower Bridge is a familiar bridge. I hadn't really thought about it in the whole context of all the projects that people work on in the lighting industry as being something that potentially was going to be iconic.
Yes, it was.
It was just another project that needed to be delivered. And I worked on it through, from the early design concepts through to managing the supply. All the floodlights needed to be painted, again, from the architect's point of view. Yeah. So they blended in a little bit. They wanted baffles that would reduce the glare. Very difficult because, something like the bridge, you view it from the river as a boat. You view it from the
banks,
the embankments and the traffic coming over.
Yeah. So it's glare going in every direction.
So glare going. So you have to say, well, which is, who are we really designing it for? So we ended up thinking, well, it's the sort of the river view, the classical picture that you would see of the bridge, and the baffles that we design. I would have to say, when we first delivered them to site, the electrician went, "What?" He said, "Well, they won't last," and true to his word, the first bit of wind blew these baffles and they floated down the river. So we went, right, okay, we need to strengthen the whole thing up a little bit. And the final design, lasted through the life of the installation. Yeah,
there's always wise old geezer somewhere that knows exactly what's going to happen from experience.
That's right.
Yes, and always listen to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did you? In the years later when it was being used as an iconic image in a lot of films and TV and magazines. I mean, I remember walking past a postcard shop once with you and just seeing postcards, just 5 different views of your lighting on the bridge. Yeah. Tower Bridge. So I just swore. How did that make you feel?
And I think that's what really has drawn me into, particularly the exterior lighting part, because for 25 years I would walk across or drive across London and look across the river and see the project that you've done. Yeah. Now, if you do office lighting or shop lighting, well, actually, sometimes you don't even get to see the final result. And sometimes you'll go and, you might visit the installation that you've done.
Yeah. Or you might speak to someone that has been in it.
But this is something that
millions of people see.
Already there. And particularly when you started to see the images appearing, I can remember coming back through Heathrow once, and there was one of these enormous, picture of a Beefeater, welcome to London. And behind it is the picture of Tower Bridge with the lighting that you'd done.
Yeah, you very rarely see it unlit.
No.
The pictures were always of it lit.
Well, I think, I've said this before, that you go into and people don't have postcards as much as they used to. But if you went into, one of the London souvenir shops and you looked at all the postcards of anything in London, the iconic images are always the ones at night.
Yes. And that's really important to think about in the context of light.
Absolutely.
Is that light brings people together, and it highlights things that are important to a society and a culture.
So a couple of the stories around Tower Bridge.
Yep.
Some of the lights to light the chains were mounted on the bascules, which are the bits below road level that go down to the water, which obviously had to be aimed.
Yes, but they're sort of near the water.
Well, depends when the tide is, what the tide's doing. So they came up with the idea of, I think there was a barge which had a hydraulic lift on it. And he said, well, what we do is we'll tether this barge to the bascule, and you can go up in the lift.
Well, like a genie lift type?
Well,
it was mounted onto the...
Yeah, it's mounted onto the boat.
It's not like they took a genie lift and just strapped it onto the barge.
No, this was a proper...
We'll have a conversation about something like that later, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's a proper,
design
workman's
lift.
Mounted onto the barge.
Yeah.
So you tether the barge, and up there is a bracket with 3-4 floodlights on that need to be aimed. So you go up in this lift, and two things happen. First of all, the tide. So you begin at high tide.
Yep.
And the bracket, the lift is like this.
Yep.
And then as the tide goes out, so the lift is doing that.
Because it's tethered to the bascule.
Well, no, because the tide's going down.
Well, the tide's going down, but why is it tilting?
No, it's not tilting. It's having to extend.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
It's having to extend
this
higher.
To me means...
no.
The whole... I thought actually you tied it off.
I'll come to the tilt bit in a second.
Okay, right.
So it has to... So the lift has to go higher as the tide goes down. But as the boats go past, they create a wake. So this hoist is then moving in this direction.
And the higher it is, the more that
moves.
Yeah.
So at some point, you're holding onto a floodlight, and then a couple of minutes later,
it's 5 meters away.
It's over there.
Wow.
And, we won't even talk about health and safety.
No, let's not.
Which was slightly less rigorous than it is today.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, sometimes you do things like that and you don't even realise what the danger might be because you're doing something no one's ever done before. No one's ever tried putting lights on there before. Yeah. I'm guessing that barges frequently do that sort of activity, but not, in that specific location with a light, with electric. It's just never been done before.
And, these days you would have trained abseilers going down to do that work for you.
But you're the lighting designer and you're pointing that light.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But because there were lights in lots of different locations, we spent 3 evenings and we'd go up there as a team from Philips into the workman's hut. We go, right, so this evening you are going to do these ones, you're going to do these ones, you're going to do these ones. This is the drawings, this is where they've got to go. So everyone went off, usually with an electrician or someone to accompany them to do whatever was necessary. And one of the teams, I think it was the second evening, were going to aim the floodlights that were mounted on the riverbank by the Tower of London. So we had two positions, one a bit further away from the bridge and one a bit closer. And the way to get to these floodlights was to take a ladder from the shore when the tide was out, put it up against the river wall, and go up to aim the floodlights. So they went into the Tower of London and they were aiming these floodlights. And when they came to leave, they discovered they'd been locked in because whoever it was that had given us permission to go in had maybe gone off duty, and they'd just forgotten that there was a team. It wasn't me, but there was a team of people there inside. So they wandered about the Tower of London for about an hour trying to find how to get out, and then realised they had a ladder.
So they broke out of the Tower of London.
So they broke out of the Tower of London by putting the ladder up against the wall, putting the ladder down the other side and going out the other side.
Wow. I mean, with no jewels in hand, I take it.
No jewels in hand.
But
No
they could have
jewels in
done.
hand. Yeah.
Most people struggle to get into the Tower of London
Yeah.
to make it
No,
through.
this was, so they had to break out. And you know Peter Raynham.
Yes.
He was one of those.
Well done, Peter, for breaking out. I mean, I wonder if maybe Peter and the others may have been the first and the last people in the last few centuries to have been locked in the tower.
Could be. Yeah. Yeah.
You can say
yeah.
lock them in the tower.
Yeah. Or maybe the only people who were inadvertently locked in the tower.
And escaped.
And escaped. Yeah. Yeah. Without losing their head.
I think there's a whole story in this. We need to get Peter, and
Yes, you can.
he'd have a few stories.
Get Peter to tell you that. So the switch on was May 1987.
Yeah.
And because it was all discharge lighting.
I wasn't even two. Sorry.
No. Because it was all discharge lighting.
Everyone's expecting this. And the lights go
everyone
on.
was going, oh, the lights will just come on. You go, no, it's going to take a few minutes to come on. And also at that time, I think we ended up having to have an electrician at all the different distribution points on walkie-talkies, just before mobile phones, to turn everything on. And the signal, as you intimated, was Margaret Thatcher, who arrived, and she was going to break the flag. So the flagpole that was erected just downstream with a flag at the top, and she would come out, pull the rope, the flag would break, because Tower Bridge is, it's all nautical connections. And when the flag had broken, everyone would switch their lights on. Yeah. And of course, nothing, it looked like nothing had happened. So to cover that, we'd arranged, or the City of London had arranged for fireworks. Yeah. So there was a barge just the other side of the bridge, and they had 5 minutes worth of fireworks, by which time when the fireworks stopped, all the lights were up at full, and everyone went, hooray. And then there was a few boats going up and down the river to see it in its full glory.
And there it stayed for 25
and there it stayed
years.
Until 2012.
We're going to talk about the new lighting? Best not to?
Best not to, maybe.
Best not to. Okay. Well, let's move on to another project. I could talk about Tower Bridge all day because I think it's a fascinating one. But I think we've only got time for one of the others. We'll do the others. And we're going to talk about one that, when you say it, actually, if you don't know what it is, I think you wouldn't. You have to explain what it is, and then you might. If we showed a picture, you'd recognise it. But it's the Pepsi Max Big One.
Yes.
What is the Pepsi Max Big One? We go, well, was at the time the UK's biggest, highest roller coaster.
It wasn't just the highest; it was the fastest. Yeah, and it wasn't just UK. I think it was in roller coaster world. Right. It was the tallest and the biggest and the fastest.
It was a big deal, and it was at Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
At Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
Yeah. Well, it still is. It's still there now.
It's still there now.
Still with the same lighting?
Well, that's another story.
Okay, right. So, how did you go from bridges to roller coasters?
It was the same sort of thing, where by that time I was running the design team. So I forget. So this must be maybe 10 years on from Tower Bridge. Yeah. So, but I was running the design team in Phillips. And again, the call came, well, we want, the roller coaster was just being constructed. That one we did have to bid for. So we went up again, did some trials. And the brief was, you can see that from the person who ran the Pleasure Beach.
Yeah, there's a character right here.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The brief was, you can see the coaster from 5 miles away as you drive into Blackpool. I want to be able to see it at night from 5 miles away as you drive into Blackpool.
Right, so just bright.
So it needed to have a certain brightness.
And of course, you've got loads of classic roller coaster lights ready to go because they exist, right?
Well, how do you light a roller coaster?
Had it really been done like this before?
Well, I don't think anyone had lit a roller coaster.
So you have to completely start from scratch with a plan.
So the first thing was to say, well, how much light do we need? Because it's painted dark blue.
That's helpful.
And
red.
But
dark red.
Dark red. So we started with high pressure sodium, and it just didn't work. It just killed the colours. And you went a little bit down the promenade and you couldn't see it. So we went, well, let's look at, again, the floodlights that we were then using for sports lighting, which by then was not what we were using in Tower Bridge with a short arc. So you had some really intense beams, getting sort of 3 million candelas as a peak intensity, 70 metres up in the air.
Yeah.
So we did a few tests to get the light level that we needed to give you that visual effect. And then, in terms of the design process, it was then going back to a little bit like I was used to in the theatre. When you say, well, this is a beam, this is what it's going to give me. Now I've got a narrow beam here, a medium beam here, and a wide beam here. So I need to combine all of those to give me the right amount of light on the vertical structure. And then you multiply that. So as you went round, the structure came down. So you wouldn't use a very high intensity beams. You'd use some medium beams and wider beams, and just gradually built up the design. And I came back and I said, right, I think we need, it was almost 200 floodlights to do this job.
To the whole roller coaster.
And the feedback I got was, well, we had some competition from another manufacturer, and they were using a lower powered floodlight, and they reckoned that they could do it with 90. And I went,
no.
Well, you've asked me.
Yep.
My opinion, from everything that I know, is if you go with the design that I've done, you will achieve the whole of that roller coaster being illuminated. You will see it from 5 miles away, and it will become an iconic structure in Blackpool. And ultimately, we convinced the owner of the Pleasure Beach that ours was the right solution.
So actually sales, it's not so much design, is it? It's sales at that point. You're selling your idea.
You're selling
competing.
You're selling the concept. Someone's got to be, and at that time you didn't do, computer visualizations and things like that.
So how do you prove it to them?
I mean, the owner had been out, he'd seen our trials, he'd seen the trials that the other people were doing. So when we came and did the pitch and how our design would work, we were able to say, well, you saw the trials we did. If you're happy with the little bit that we did for you, the rest of it will look the same.
Yeah.
So it was then a case of going around after the installation and commissioning everything. And you will remember coming up to the commissioning.
I do. I remember being very wet.
It was a very wet evening.
I've actually got a funny story. And I still feel like this might have been a dream, but I know it was real. You left me. You wouldn't do this now, but you and the contractor left me to go and focus something that we couldn't get to.
Yeah.
And I was on top of a building or wall in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
At 2 a.m.
It was quite late.
At the middle of Blackpool Pleasure Beach when it was closed, in the dark, in the rain. And I was standing in some sort of like an electrical contractor's shelter or something, but it was open.
Yeah.
And in this bizarrest place imaginable, pitch black, a guy walks up to me. He says, "You right there?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just doing some lighting." My dad. He went, "All right. Well, just tell him you met one of the Chippendales," and he walked off. And I still think to myself, was that real or not?
It could be real.
But I mean, what a bizarre situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so even as what have I been? That was 93. You did that.
94.
I've been 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I was my middle son's age.
Yeah.
And I can just, leaving an 8-year-old in that sort of place when there's a random strange man who claims to be a Chippendale walking around.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that today.
No.
But I remember standing there in the soggy rain, looking at you pointing all these lights at this roller coaster. And as the light, like when you're doing the tallest bit, the beam on that was so narrow. I mean, they say they're sports lights, designed for floodlighting pitches. It was such a pure white as well, which we're not used to seeing quite a lot at that time, because most floodlighting was sort of low pressure sodium. But I'd see the light go up and suddenly it revealed the top of this roller coaster. But it just kept going up and up. You thought, you can't believe the height of this thing. And then it just illuminated it and it glowed. And I remember thinking that, wow, this is actually, for such an ugly structure, just blue and red roller coaster, there's nothing special about it. But this light has suddenly made it feel special. I mean, okay, it's big, it's fast, that's what people on roller coasters want. But it actually became quite an iconic image because it was lit. Again, same story.
Yeah, absolutely. And apparently, I only discovered this a few months ago, that for the switch on, Jeffrey Thompson, who was then, owned the park, it's now being run by his daughter,
right?
Next generation.
Just like us.
They actually shut the road that runs along the back from the seafront. They built a big stage, and they had, and I forget the name of the group, but it was some.
Wasn't the Chippendales, was it? Because I'll explain that.
No, it was some big pop group, rock group,
right,
that played, and they constructed this, literally just stopped all the traffic for the evening, and this was the big switch on.
But this renewed Pleasure Beach, and in doing so, also renewed Blackpool. I know Blackpool Tower's iconic as well, but this suddenly sat next to it as an icon.
Again, if you look at the time, you could pick up a postcard of Blackpool, and it had a montage of the Blackpool Tower and the roller coaster, which were opposite ends, but so they had to bring them together. But it's another one of those things that becomes an iconic structure. And interestingly, I was talking to Johnny, my son-in-law,
my brother-in-law,
when they lived at Southport. And he said he can remember seeing the roller coaster from Southport.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that more than 5 miles?
Well, I think it might be. Yeah.
Wow. So he definitely got what he paid for then.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember growing up that there were 4 photos on the wall of our house, and those were 2 of them.
Yeah.
And we'll do the other 2 another time.
Yeah.
But those were all special memories for me as well, to see the work that you were doing. And they were the 2 that actually I could remember you doing. The other 2 I didn't see you working on it in memory, but I remember those 2.
Yeah.
And I remember being, as a son, looking up to his father, thinking, not only am I proud of you because you're doing something that's recognizable, but also I'm really interested in what you're doing. Like it's interesting that you're doing something that has this impact on people. And I could tell that as a 2-year-old and 8-year-old. And that inspired me to do it. Yeah. And those images on the wall, maybe a little bit too much propaganda in the house.
I think I was always keen, or not keen, but the job, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a 9-to-5 plus whatever else. And because of that, and because I would be away from time to time, when there was an opportunity to show you or the rest of the family a little bit inside what I was doing, then I would take that. If there was a chance to take you to Tower Bridge or take you up to Blackpool or whatever the project was, because I thought that helped to explain a little bit what it is that
where you are and what you're doing.
Where it is and what I'm doing.
And I try to do the same thing with my 3 boys. I let them know what it is I'm working on, because I'm sitting there on my laptop in the evenings. Obviously, you didn't do that when you were. You came home, I remember you made phone calls or wrote your notebook or something, but there's no laptops and computers at home when I was a child. But they see me working. They know I'm away sometimes for periods of time, so I can show them what I'm doing. It's on my computer. It's a lot more tangible what I'm doing when they can literally sit next to me while I'm working on it. Because I'm working my laptop. But with you, we couldn't see what you were doing. But I always used to love going into Phillips's office on a Saturday morning if you needed to pop in. Just get hold of all that stationery, all those big drawing boards. But that still isn't connecting you with what you do.
No.
Going to see the projects delivered or seeing them being made, that's always been inspirational for me. So let's finish this episode up with those 2. I think we've got we've left a little carrot there for the other 2. So actually, there's quite a lot we need to talk about. There's other 2 photos that we'll talk about another time. But thank you very much, and we'll do another episode soon.
Great, look forward to it.